Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Sorry the intro played a little long there. It's actually still showing us spinning, so I'm not sure exactly what's up with my studio this evening. But in any case, we'll push on with the show tonight. One of the biggest problems that we face is problem-causing thoughts that function somewhat automatically. We tend to narrow our frame of reference and focus on these thoughts over and over again, so we need to learn to break the cycle of automatic thinking and recognize that when we fall prey to these thoughts, we generate feelings that harm our minds. Billy puts it in this way on page 120 of The Might of Thoughts: problem-causing thoughts and the evaluations and the feelings which arise from them, which are unconsciously tended and nurtured, and which operate automatically and throw the psyche into turmoil. It is these automatic thoughts which are the crucial point, because it is through them that the feelings are disturbed and thereby also the psyche. So our mental disharmony is what causes our suffering to grow. And these thoughts repeat over and over again. And so the one thing that we can do is check when our feelings are getting disturbed. You know, your feelings should actually be encouraging you, not disturbing you. Because these disturbing feelings are a sign that you have entered into a kind of thinking that is not good for the psyche. And each time these repeating thoughts move through the mind, they generate more disturbing feelings. So we have to break this pattern of uncontrolled automatic thinking. And this can be done through meditation, focusing on something else, listening to music, going out into nature. Our consciousness is like a garden, and we have to clarify our thoughts, just like we have to weed our garden. We have to reduce confusion, and confusion is when things tend to blend together, and we lose the distinction between things. And when the confusion sets in, often unconsciously, we go back to these problem-causing thoughts that tend to become a bad habit, and we repeat them over and over again. These thoughts create a distortion of reality, and those thoughts can lead to depression. We can start thinking about these problems even unconsciously. You know, many activities go on in the human mind that are unconscious, and that's one of the big eye-openers as I went through this book for the third time, is realizing how much the unconscious plays in all of this. Your unconscious mind has a tremendous effect, and our unconscious even thinks. And we have automatic unconscious thoughts. And what comes to mind particularly is addictions. And these addictions can trap us. That's one form of unconscious thinking. And we need to examine which conscious or unconscious attitudes are causing a behavior. Because we do things that we don't even want to do. And this is challenging. Because the conscious or the unconscious thoughts or ideas we don't immediately recognize. And they just happen, and we don't understand that until we have the feelings associated with those unconscious thoughts. And we've already gone into disturbing feelings that can shake up the whole nervous system before we sometimes realize that we've had these kind of thoughts. Sometimes it's helpful to even create a diary of thoughts and feelings. Again, it's our mental disharmony that causes the suffering to grow in your life. We need to develop a kind of systematic self-observation. These problematic thoughts, they lead to distortions of reality. And however, as a rule, these problematic thoughts and feelings are unconscious. And in page 138 in The Might of Thoughts, it says, the circumstances from which suffering grows in the human being are the product of the might of his/her thoughts, and thereby also the product of his own mental disharmony. Harmony is a relationship that's characterized by a lack of conflict or by an agreement. A relationship in which various components exist together without destroying one another. In music, a chord produces a harmony with the first, third, and fifth notes of each scale, and this automatically produces an orderly or pleasing combination of sounds. Well, we can also have a harmony of thoughts and feelings, and those harmony of thoughts and feelings lead to joy and enjoyment. So one thing to keep in mind is don't rebel against circumstances that are against your views. Difficult circumstances can lead us to discover hidden powers within us. So again, lower thoughts lead to lower habits, lower feelings, lower circumstances in your life. Alcoholism, hate, anger erupts, grief, errors of judgment, many kinds of suffering. And if your thoughts are destructive, they often end up into becoming confusing, and you'll become exhausted. It's one way to always tell when you've had these uncontrolled repeating thoughts is that we start to get confused and exhausted. And sometimes human beings that are afflicted by these kind of thoughts cannot control them any longer. A habit is a regular practice. It's hard to give up. A habit is like a routine. We developed automatic thoughts, which usually are bad. And believe it or not, these thoughts can really harm your health. Our consciousness determines its own health by means of the might of its thoughts. But it also determines the health not only of your consciousness, but your thoughts determine the health of your body. Page 152, The Might of Thoughts. The origins of thoughts thereby forms from various factors, which arise from both ideas and views as well as from wishes and desires. Another thing I came across this weekend, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, is it's necessary to control the very origins of our thoughts. Now that's a good question. What does that mean? If we have a good, clean, neutral, positive thoughts, then our psyche will not be harmed. Your psyche can be degenerated from either a positive or a negative imbalance. The goal is to maintain this balanced harmony in the psyche. And we need to learn to brighten up our psyche with things that are affirming to life. How many times do you think things that discourage yourself, that make you anxious, that give you that tense feeling? To affirm means to offer emotional support and encouragement. Now that's an interesting idea. Make sure your thoughts are giving you emotional encouragement. Many times our thoughts are actually discouraging us. Your thoughts, especially as you get older, affect your appearance more and more. Wrinkles can appear because of thoughts that we have. Even characteristics which express feelings for lower creatures can have an effect on our face. So your thoughts have a tremendous effect on your appearance, your physical health, your mental health. We should have neutral, positive, equalized, harmonious thoughts. You know, all of your spiritual forces are neutral, positive in nature. You have a spiritual consciousness that has something in it called the Gemut. The Gemut controls the thoughts and the feelings of the spiritual consciousness. The psyche controls the thoughts and the feelings of the material consciousness. Your spirit form is located in an area of your midbrain called the superior colliculus. Your spirit form, between lifetimes, evaluates the thoughts of the previous lifetime. And those thoughts, which were of neutral, positive in nature, those thoughts that can be turned into evolutive factors, like joy, peace, love, and hope, are then stored away and processed by the spirit form. And they add to the evolution of the spirit form. Your subconscious mind contains the memories of your previous lifetime. On the spirit side, the spirit form creates the new consciousness block that contains your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, your unconscious mind, your personality. Every time you incarnate, you get a new personality that's different from the one you just had. And that whole mental material consciousness comes in when the spirit form comes in. Now it's our responsibility to think the right thoughts to maintain this harmony in the psyche and the material consciousness. The more harmony in the material consciousness, the more neutral positive thinking, the more evolution the spirit form gets from that material lifetime. Now, if you get out of control of the good human nature, that's called a sartong, and it tends to enslave us. But if you think about peace, love, joy, freedom, harmony, things that are pleasant, think about a beautiful day in the sunshine with animals or people that you care about. All of these things are good for your human nature. The might of the thoughts are able to determine the human being's physical well-being. The majority of problems with our health come from problems with our thoughts. Anxiety and fear kill thousands of people. Anxious thoughts, they have a demoralizing effect, when actually your thoughts should offer you support. Your thoughts, you should always be supporting yourself, encouraging yourself, but we don't. Instead, we think thoughts that sometimes negatively affect our nervous system. You know, the thoughts that help your nervous system are neutral positive, they're happy thoughts. Wisdom conditioned love are the thoughts that bring health to the nervous system. I think it's in Contact 238, the Plejaren talk about an imbalance or a disharmony. And they tell us that we will have in the future more and more disharmony. Also, disharmony will express itself in our music as disharmony comes into our psyche. However, you can change that because you're in control of your life. You are the master of your own destiny. You can steer your thoughts wherever you want them to go. And by doing that, you can help others to live. You know, there's an erroneous saying called live and let live. We should live and help live. And if you become a person that is magnanimous, very generous, forgiving, especially towards someone or something less powerful than yourself, you are somehow going to get help from the creational natural laws. In the OM it says, talking about the person that is magnanimous, the person that follows the spiritual teachings, it says, his entire sense is magnanimous, and beauty expresses itself in his plain life, full of spiritual dignity. His inner stillness brings the beauty that no artist can paint and no poet may describe in words. Notice that the person that is following the spiritual teachings is said to have an inner stillness, not disharmony. You have an inner stillness. Now look internally for a moment and ask yourself, do you have an inner stillness now? If you have an inner stillness, then your spirit is functioning. You're thinking correctly. We should not allow ourselves to drift on the ocean of life. We need to take the helm in hand and steer the ship of our life. And always take the helm in your hands. Do not let waves rip it away from you. And in order to stay on course, you'll need optimism. Optimism will help you be consistent. Don't ever lose your conviction that all things in your life will end well. Real optimism fulfills a very important factor in human life. The spirit form, by nature, I think, is optimistic. Even though, our spirit form is not really conscious at this point, not entirely, which I don't completely wrap my mind around either. The human spirit, Semyase called the wonder of all wonders. Billy, in the middle 70s, Edward Albert Meyer, this humble farmer from Switzerland, has had at least 3 mentors, extraterrestrial humans. One was a very beautiful woman named Semyase. She was about 350 years old, looked about 30 years old according to our perspectives. And she gave Billy much instruction about the spiritual life. And she would talk about the creation, the universal consciousness, what we erroneously call God today. She would call it the creation. She would say love and wisdom go together. And the creation and its laws are love and wisdom at the same time. If we live in love and in wisdom, then we'll live in optimism. Optimism is hopefulness and confidence about the future. Optimism is the belief that you'll have a successful outcome. Synonyms for optimism include confidence, hopefulness, cheerfulness. Optimism is a mental attitude. It's a worldview. Optimism seems to have an effect on your health. Analysis has confirmed the assumption that optimism is related to our psychological well-being. You know, it's really interesting that optimists tend to face their problems head on. And that's one thing I've been trying to do. And when I'm ever faced with a problem, face it head on, taking active and constructive steps to solve the problems. Don't abandon your efforts. Take those problems and face them head on. You see, optimistic behavior enables a human being to see and acknowledge the clear truth, even in the worst situation. Thus, an optimist is therefore not a clown. That's the Might of Thoughts, page 220. So, optimism is the function of a healthy psyche. Remember, our own mental disharmony leads us into suffering. We have to take the personal responsibility to analyze our thoughts, to maintain optimism, even under the greatest pressure. We should be hopeful and happy. You know, one of the escapes, I would have to call it an escape, is our emotions. You know, our emotions, in everyday speech, a person's state of feeling, we might call the emotions. Now, feelings usually evolve slowly and are related to our thoughts. Emotions just surge outward. Emotion is linked to the arousal of our nervous system. And the Meyer information says that emotions can be lightning fast. Anger and rage are considered emotions. And Billy has an interesting article on anger and rage. Billy says that anger and rage are not the same thing. If you try to fight rage with rage, it can lead to devastating results. Let me read from the anger and rage article. It says, due to ununderstanding and popularity, anger and rage are often put on the same level as each other. However, it thereby concerns 2 fundamentally different factors which also have different manifestations and effects. Now, in rage, it says, emotions are allowed to run free. And perhaps that's one of the differences between anger and rage. Billy says that rage must be met with love and feeling for others. Anger and rage tend to take away our discernment. It's the non-use of the intellect. Anger is a violent, uncontained outburst. These are escapes. If anger is a release, if we maintain our self-control, we don't have to have anger. And Marianne Eulinger-Mondrian, Switzerland, talks in her article called Anger Harms the Liver. She says, protecting our psyche means that we don't retreat into our shell, nor do we shout with anger. And the trigger for anger is within ourselves. And when this anger comes out, it's very toxic for our cells. Our liver cells, our hepatocytes, are affected in such a way that they degenerate into cancer. Anger can produce cancer cells in your liver. This is a word that sometimes defines people who are angry. Intransigence means refusing to compromise or agree. Inflexibility. Inflexibility is sometimes associated with anger. So if you want to prevent anger, it means you don't swallow it, nor do you let it out entirely. So I'm still learning all the ins and outs of anger. There's much to learn in this book. It's astonishing. Emotions cannot create thoughts. Emotions are reactions, but feelings occur because of thoughts. Emotions arise spontaneously and are hard to bring under control. Some of the examples of emotions are crying and laughter. And both with crying and laughter, the emotions rise so quickly that we can't steer these emotions. The emotions are very challenging. And the unconscious mind sometimes, I think, is the trigger for those emotions. You see, we have thoughts in our unconscious. And sometimes these thoughts can affect us. They can make us deceivers of ourselves. Billy's second extraterrestrial mentor, a woman named Ascot, described that a man named Reinhold Schmidt was deceived by the Giza intelligence. And he also deceived himself. We can unconsciously deceive ourselves. Remember when we studied the stigmata and the people that bleed from the hands and feet and bleed from the sides and the foreheads, and it's because of religious delusion, because they've been an unconscious deceiver of themselves. These are tremendously powerful unconscious thoughts that affect the body so negatively that they can cause wounds. Very interesting. Now, we've talked about the Giza intelligence many times. The Giza intelligences were extraterrestrials, a kind of a splinter group from the Plejaren themselves that resided far below the Giza Plateau. Since roughly 1,000 or so years after the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria, they manifested in a line of brutal dictators, one of which the Maya information says was the person or the God of the Old Testament. It's called Jehovah. And you can imagine with information like that why there's been something like 20 attempts on Billy's life. Well, we talked about the stigmata before and the incredible, bizarre things that, there was the one woman named Teresa Neumann who lived in a village called Konnersruth in Bavaria, and you could literally see blood flowing from this woman's eyes when she sits in bed in her trance. This is the incredible power of our human mind. Teresa would bleed on most Fridays. I mean, this is just incredible. You know, what we can do with our minds if we harness our minds, if we can really steer those thoughts. Well, folks, I'm going to take just a few minutes and we're going to listen to a little more of these. I said I was going to listen to these nature sounds, or I thought I was going to say I was going to listen to these nature sounds. We'll go ahead and do that. And just for a few minutes, and then we'll pick back up with the second half of our show, and we'll listen to that information on that alien megastructure. Sometimes these clips, they don't play so well. I think that's the case here. I'm having trouble with my studio this evening. I'm not sure if you're able to hear that at all. I can't really hear it. But it's going to spin indefinitely. So I tell you what I'll do. I'll start our clip on the megastructures. And hopefully I can stop the other clip. Anyway, here we go.
NASA's Kepler Space Telescope is tasked with finding small, rocky worlds orbiting distant stars. However, exoplanets aren't the only thing Kepler can detect. Stellar flares, star spots and dusty planetary rings can also pop up in the mission's observations. But there's also been speculation that Kepler may have the ability to detect more than natural phenomena. If they're out there, Kepler may also detect the signature of artificial structures orbiting other stars. Imagine an advanced civilization that's well up on the Kardashev scale and has the ability to harness energy directly from its star. This hypothetical alien civilization may want to construct vast megastructures, like supersized solar arrays in orbit around their host star, that could be so big that they blot out a sizable fraction of starlight as they pass in front. When Kepler detects an exoplanet, it does so by sensing the very slight dip in starlight from a given star. The premise is simple: an exoplanet orbits in front of star, known as a transit. Kepler detects a slight dimming of starlight and creates a light curve, basically a graph charting the dip in starlight over time. Much information can be gleaned from the light curve, such as the physical size of the transiting exoplanet. But it can also deduce the exoplanet's shape. Normally, the shape of an exoplanet isn't particularly surprising because it's, well, planet-shaped. It's round. The physics of planetary formation dictate that a planetary body above a certain mass will be governed by hydrostatic equilibrium. But say if Kepler detects something that isn't round, well, that's when things can get a bit weird. For the most part, any dip in star brightness can be attributed to some kind of natural phenomenon. But what if all possibilities are accounted for and only one scenario is left? What if that scenario is this object appears to be artificial? In other words, what if it's alien? A star, named KIC 8462852, has been found with a highly curious transit signal. In a paper submitted to the journal Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, astronomers, including citizen scientists from the Planet Hunters crowdsourcing program, report, over the duration of the Kepler mission, KIC 8462852 was observed to undergo irregularly shaped, aperiodic dips in flux down to below the 20% level. The research paper is thorough, describing the phenomenon, pointing out that this star is unique. We've seen nothing like it. Kepler has collected data on this star steadily for 4 years. It's not instrumental error. Kepler isn't seeing things. The signal is real.
Well, they're already starting to, at least in some of the articles that I've been reading, they're starting to pull back from the alien megastructure. It's kind of what I thought. It seems to be a pattern that they follow. I'm not sure exactly why they do that, but they'll talk about some fantastic finding, and then they'll kind of later come out and debunk it a little bit on their own. Another fantastic occurrence this week was some of the stuff that was said about Pluto having a blue sky and having water on the surface. Here's an interesting clip talking about Pluto.
NASA's New Horizons space probe sent back stunning photos from the dwarf planet, revealing it has blue skies and water ice on its surface. Who would have expected a blue sky in the Kuiper Belt? It's gorgeous, Alan Stern, New Horizons principal investigator, said in a statement. The sky is painted blue when haze particles, which NASA said are likely gray or red, scatter blue light. The second finding released today shows small regions of water ice on Pluto, although it wasn't initially obvious until scientists reviewed data from the Ralph Spectral Composition Mapper on New Horizons. Large expanses of Pluto don't show exposed water ice because it's apparently masked by other, more volatile ices across most of the planet, scientists said in a statement. Understanding why water appears exactly where it does, and not in other places, is a challenge that we are digging into. The piano-sized probe is speeding through the Kuiper Belt, an area at the edge of Earth's solar system. After the intensive data transmission process, NASA is considering another flyby over Kuiper Belt object known as 2014 MU69.
Well, that's another incredible finding by NASA. This past week, water on Pluto and blue skies from a planet literally billions of miles from the sun. I think we have a lot to learn about our solar system, a lot to learn about space in general. You know, I talk about the Billy Meyer case so much because there's just so much useful information here. I've been talking about this evening The Might of Thoughts. It's a book that Billy wrote. In the German it's called Macht der Gedanken, and it tells us and teaches us how to control our thoughts, because we can be successful in our lives if we steer our thoughts to the outcomes that we want, that we learn to analyze our own thinking and learn to analyze our thinking and recognize neutral, positive thoughts. Billy, as a very young boy, one May evening went outside and he looked up at a beautiful starry sky, and he heard a voice in his head that said, "My life is made out of the love of creation." And a short time later, words formed on Billy's lips which said, "Since ancient times, you have lived among the stars." And Billy knew who he was and what his mission was on this earth. And suddenly impulses came from somewhere, and these impulses were from the universal storage banks. Now that occurred when Billy, in 1941, when Billy was about 4 years old. A year later, he started to get telepathic messages from an extraterrestrial human named Svath. Svath was from a race of people that have been called the Pleiadians here on the Earth for hundreds of years, but they're not from our Pleiades. They're from a star system some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades in a different space and time configuration. And they're very advanced people that live in harmony with the planet, in harmony with nature, in harmony with creation. You see, Billy knew at a very young age that everything that exists in the whole universe is a manifestation of the might and the infinite and true love of the mighty universal consciousness. You see, the the extraterrestrials that Billy had contact with, they do not use the word God. They use the words universal consciousness or creation. And there's a reason for that. Because the word God has a connotation today that it really shouldn't have. The term God is very anthropomorphic. The Plairon tell us that the intelligence which created our universe, it radiates love. And the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. However, the universal consciousness creation doesn't become jealous. It doesn't become angry. It also doesn't meddle in your life. You are responsible for your own life. Self-responsibility and the recognition and fulfillment of responsibility in regard to fellow human beings in the world of plants and animals is something that Billy learned at a very young age. He started to get telepathic messages from this extraterrestrial human man named Svath, who landed his pear-shaped, silvery craft in Bulak, Switzerland, right around 42 or 43, 1942-43. The first time Billy saw Svath, he was wearing something that kind of looked like a diver's suit. He took young Edward Albert Meyer into the ship and brought him up some 70,000 meters above the earth. And what he started telling Billy about was his lifetime, and that he would be a teacher and a prophet, and that he had lived other lives on the earth, and that he had been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, and he had taught an ancient universal teaching that is called the teaching of the Spirit, that talks about the universal consciousness, how we all have a spirit form, how that spirit form reincarnates over many, many, many lifetimes, millions of lifetimes. It also talks about, the teaching of the Spirit talks about self-responsibility, about learning to control our thinking. So these were terms and ideas that young Edward Albert Meyer was taught again by his spiritual mentor. And Svath put a device on Billy's head which awoken the memories of his predecessor personalities that were locked deep within his subconscious. So young Billy was living a life that was very, very different from a very, very young age. He was getting telepathic messages from Svath. He would meet with Svath out in the wooded areas. He would actually go up into the ship, and he was taught very deep truths at a very, very young age. And he was taught, one of the things he was taught was about the oneness and connectedness of everything. He realized that the infinite love of creation, it connects all life, and that in all life that love lies hidden. Svath taught Billy that the love of creation was immeasurable. It gives everything selflessly and demands no payment for it. But the biggest problem with us here on the earth is our ignorance concerning the creation and its laws and recommendations. So after 11 years meeting with this 1,000-year-old extraterrestrial man who taught Billy about his previous lives as Henoch, as Eliah, who we call Elijah, Henoch, who we call Enoch, Josiah, who we call Isaiah, Jeremiah, who we call Jeremiah, Emmanuel, Muhammad. Eventually, Svath died, and Billy got another mentor, a woman from a parallel universe to ours called Asket. And one of the things that Asket did at their very first meeting was to take Billy far below the Giza Plateau, far below the Great Pyramid, where there was a group of extraterrestrials called the Giza Intelligences, or the B'Phath, who had contact with Hitler during World War II, who had contact with the Thule, or the Thule Society in Germany. And this group of extraterrestrials was using religion to help control the people of the earth. They wanted really to control the earth as their own. And they had a technology called telenotic impulses. And these telenotic impulses still affect us today. And there was a long lineage of these Giza intelligences coming back from way back to the times of Atlantis and Lemuria. And I think of Eris. There was a man named Eris the Barbarian who started the trouble between Atlantis and Lemuria. Eris was an example of what you would call an Ishwish. And these are human beings who are currently living in the last stages of human material existence. And this is the fifth stage. Ptah, Pelagon, Atlant, Yehovan were all examples of Ishwishes, kings of wisdom. Now, occasionally, one of these kings of wisdom will not be a king of wisdom in terms of the spiritual life, but they will be more technically oriented or not completely balanced. And Eris the Barbarian was one of these. And it was very, very interesting because when the Ishwishes, when the King of Wisdoms, when they were here on the earth, they were also, in some respects, vulnerable. And in the canon, Billy has a book, it's called the OM, and in Canon 10, it says, because these Ishwishes are sensitively perceiving, especially susceptible to the vibrations of evil and the negative, which is still part of the human being. So they were literally, sometimes the vibration of our ignorance could put the lives of these extraterrestrials in danger. And that's one reason why the very, very highly advanced extraterrestrial humans only will have contact with very specific peoples, like Edward Albert Meyer, who has a very, very advanced spirit form. His spirit form is just because of its age. Now, Canon 52 in the OM says some very controversial things. It says that gods of the earth were human beings and that they came from the depths of the universe, from foreign systems, galaxies and worlds, and they elevated themselves on the earth, unrightfully above the humans. They named themselves God and Creator. They created religions and sects, and they made the earth humans dependent on them. They demanded worship, and the people of the earth became enslaved and dependent on these gods. And each one of these gods created separate religions and then set themselves above the earth humans, who became slaves to them. And some of these gods were degenerate and malicious and obsessed for greed and power. So again, these gods were overt in early days, and they went underground as the Giza intelligences still trying to manipulate the people of the earth. And eventually, the Plejaren got rid of the Giza intelligences. So today, they're no longer operational. But according to my information, anyway, they were still alive and well, even in the 1970s. And I think in the late 1970s, they were finally gotten rid of. Now, earlier, I was talking about thinking and how to control our thinking and what is good, healthy thinking. Now, the Meyer information explains that love is the first and primary creational natural law, not affective love, not the romantic love, but an effective love that is based on wisdom. And listen to what Billy has to say about what love is really. He says, you can quote from what I've written. Love is the absolute certainty that one co-lives and coexists in everything, in the fauna and the flora, in the fellow human being, in each and every material and spiritual life form of any kind, and in the existence of the entire universe and beyond. Therefore, love is not just thoughts and feelings, but true love is a spiritual, fine, sensitive feeling that directly originates from the Gemut. What is the Gemut? I mentioned this earlier. The Gemut is the controlling factor of your spiritual consciousness. The Gemut controls the thoughts and feelings of your spirit form. The Gemut is from the spiritual realm. And Billy asks, what are the earth humans usually doing? They instead build a thought and feeling related love with their thoughts and feelings, which is often not permanent. They marry, are together, then after a few weeks, months, or years, everything falls apart. They divorce, they get into quarrels, they beat each other up, and in certain circumstances, there's murder and manslaughter. A feeling-related love based on thoughts and feelings is not what makes true love, which is internally perceived in origin, where things are transferred from the spirit realm into an internally perceived way, into the consciousness and the psyche. And earlier, I was discussing how our psyche is very negatively influenced by the disharmony in our mentality. So if you have disharmony in your mind, you're going to spread that into your psyche. And this is what causes our suffering to grow. And Billy explains how to control our thoughts in the book, The Might of Thoughts. And one of the keys to happiness is learning to control our thoughts. You know, many strange things occurred in our distant past. And our ancestors saw very bizarre things, and they didn't have any frame of reference to explain these things. So they did their very best, and they wrote down in our ancient books what they saw to the best of their ability. And there are certain words that have appeared in our language, and two words are called the seraphim and the cherubim, which in our ancient books are called the six-winged and four-winged angels. The Meyer information explains that there were extraterrestrials on the earth in ancient times, and they were walking among us openly. And they were involved in genetic manipulation. Here's what it says. Genetic manipulation of any kind does not fall under it because it is is in whole always only through what the Meyer information calls gene sodomy, in which new life forms are created, as I said, are capable of reproduction. So genetic engineering is a good thing, but evidently we're not supposed to create life forms which don't appear in nature. And one of these life forms that doesn't appear in nature is the animal-human seraphim, and what is called the human-animal cherubim, which have been glorified into, and they're called angels now. Seraphim is a plural word for seraph. And according to the Christian religion, the seraph is one of the celestial beings hovering above God's throne in Isaiah's vision. The seraphim is one of the fiery six-winged angels attending Jehovah in Isaiah's vision. And they're said to be the highest order of angels, often represented strangely with a child's head and with wings above and below each side. However, the Meyer material states that the seraphim were animal humans that were created via genetic manipulation in ancient times by the Lyrians. Now today, the seraph is considered a burning or a fiery angel. But these were just ancient genetic engineering. So again, the importance here is to make up your mind yourself. I'm not forcing anyone or trying to convince anyone to change their mind about things. But the Meyer information has a very different take on our ancient past and what was going on during that time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this evening's show. You've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good evening and a good week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.